Ever heard of a case so twisted it leaves you wondering about, like, everyone you know?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Some cases, they just stick with you.
That's exactly what happened to me with the Karen Swift case.
Oh, wow, that one's a wild ride.
We're talking about a seemingly regular woman from Tennessee, mother of four, vanishes one Halloween night,
Poof, gone.
leaves behind a whole mess of secrets and more questions than answers.
And the thing that gets me is how fast it goes from a missing person to something way darker.
Right? Like, boom, sinister.
We're going to be looking at court stuff, police interviews, the whole 9 yards.
Unraveling a whole web of, what was it again?
Infidelity, suspicious behavior, and a long, long wait for justice.
11 years. Can you believe that?
It's heartbreaking, honestly, especially when you learn about her marriage,
Yeah, on the surface, just a normal couple, but underneath.
Cracks, big time. Especially with the husband, David. Super controlling.
Not just your average couple spat. We're talking constant disapproval,
Yeah.
checking up on her, showing up out of nowhere.
Couldn't let her have a life outside their marriage, it seemed.
Sets the stage for everything that went down, doesn't it?
3 weeks before she disappears, she files for divorce, secretly, borrows money for lawyers, even gets a second phone.
She was scared, plain and simple, terrified of how he'd react.
Then there's that Halloween party, 2011, goes out with friends, this couple, Bill and Kathy.
And let's just say, they weren't exactly living by David's rule book.
Wild ones, those two.
And David, super suspicious of him, thought Bill was having an affair with Karen.
Adds fuel to the fire, doesn't it?
Makes you wonder, was it real concern or just plain jealousy?
Could be both, right? But either way, things were escalating.
So back to that party. Karen leaves around 2 a.m. to pick up her daughter, homesick kid,
And then, nothing.
vanished. Both David and Bill and Kathy report her missing.
2 separate reports. That's strange.
And then you got the police interviews with David. Oh boy.
What a clam up.
Rambling on, blaming Bill and Kathy, then these weird, almost fake emotional outbursts.
Not exactly the picture of a worried husband.
It's like he's putting on a show.
Right.
And then there's Karen's car, abandoned, tire slashed, divorce papers inside.
Ooh, this is getting bad.
Driver's seat adjusted like a man was the last one driving.
Foul play, for sure.
And David's right in the thick of it. But then there's this other guy, John Hogshooter,
Now that's a name you don't forget.
admits to poisoning the Swift dog, maybe even others. This is he can't remember key details about David
Poison the dog. That's messed up.
and conveniently forgets important stuff. Seems fishy, doesn't it?
More questions than answers with that one, adding another layer to this whole thing.
So we got a controlling husband, suspicious friends, and a potentially dangerous neighbor.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
And then, 6 weeks later, it gets worse. They find Karen's body in a cemetery.
Oh no.
Blunt force trauma to the head, cause of death. And get this, her clothing below the waist was gone.
Wait, what? She was found partially undressed.
Yeah, adds a whole other level of creepy to this, doesn't it?
Did they ever figure out why?
The autopsy didn't show any clear signs of assault. No male DNA either.
So many questions, so few answers.
It's like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. And every new detail makes it more confusing. But then, after 11 years, boom, they arrest David.
Finally, some kind of movement.
A sliver of relief for Karen's family, I'm sure. But as we'll see, it's just the beginning of another long road.
Can you imagine the emotions, after waiting that long?
Got to be a whirlwind, right? Relief, anger, still grieving.
Totally. And then the trial starts and things get even more complicated. Remember all that stuff David said about Bill and Kathy?
Oh yeah, during those police interviews,
Yeah.
pointing fingers one minute, defending himself the next.
Well, his lawyers, they actually used those tapes to help him.
Really? How'd they spin that?
They argued that, sure, his words sounded bad, but they actually made Bill and Kathy look guilty.
So they used his attempt to blame them as proof he didn't do it. That's kind of crazy.
Bold move for sure, and the jury bought it, at least for the big charges.
So he got off on murder.
First degree, second degree, even attempted murder, all not guilty. But they couldn't agree on manslaughter.
So a mistrial. What happens then?
Pretty much free to go at that point. But they re-indicted him later on manslaughter and assault.
Oh, wow. So they weren't done with him yet.
Nope. But his lawyers tried to get the whole thing thrown out because of the statute of limitations.
There's a time limit on charging someone.
Yep. They said too much time had passed since Karen died.
I see. So did it work?
Judge said, nope, new trial can go ahead. So that's where we're at now. David's still waiting for that trial.
Man, this case just keeps twisting and turning. Even if they convict him, It still doesn't answer everything, does it?
You're right. We still don't know exactly how it happened or why. Was it a crime of passion?
Jealous rage. That's what the prosecution was going for, right? Controlling husband? Couldn't stand her leaving.
But then there's that whole thing about him being on dating sites while Karen was still missing.
Yeah, that was weird. Like he was moving on before anyone knew what happened.
Makes you wonder, was he planning his next move while his wife's fate was up in the air?
It's a disturbing thought. Could he be that cold?
Maybe it was just a way to deal with the stress, distract himself from what he might have done.
I guess that's possible. But remember, he tried to pin it on Bill and Kathy, too.
Right, so maybe the dating sites were another way to make himself look innocent.
Maybe. Still, so many unknowns. Why was she partially undressed?
And how did he get rid of the body without leaving a trace? Plus, 11 years before they arrest him, what were the cops doing all that time?
Good questions. Did they find new evidence, or did they just finally say, okay, we got to do something?
And what about him stalking a second wife? Did that make the case stronger?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Sounds like the same patterns as with Karen.
Definitely makes you think if he stalked one wife, what else could he do?
So many possible motives. Jealousy, control, maybe covering his tracks. But even if we assume it was him, there's still so much we don't know.
Exactly. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with most of the pieces gone.
It's wild, right? One minute he's the heartbroken husband, the next he's this controlling, almost scary guy.
It's messed up, for sure. Shows you how people can hide who they really are.
Makes you think, what can we learn from Karen's story? About domestic abuse, the hidden dangers.
It's a wake-up call, that's for sure. Gotta watch out for those red flags, the isolation, the constant check-ins, emotional games, threats.
Karen was living in fear, secretly filing for divorce, getting a second phone. Makes you wonder, could anything have stopped this?
Tough question. But it shows how important it is for victims to speak up, get help, leave if they can.
It's so sad. She must have felt so trapped.
We gotta create a culture where people feel safe to come forward, where abusers face consequences.
And having support is crucial, right? Karen had friends trying to help, but it wasn't enough.
Absolutely. Support systems, resources, counseling, legal help, it all matters.
So where does this leave us? David Swift, still waiting for that retrial? Will he finally face justice for Karen?
We'll have to see. This new trial, it's a chance for some closure, at least.
Those unanswered questions, they'll probably always linger.
This case, it shows how tough the fight for justice can be. No guarantees, just a long, hard road.
And it reminds us that things aren't always what they seem, even in seemingly normal lives.
Maybe, just maybe, Karen's story can make a difference if it makes us more aware, more likely to speak up to help others. That's gotta count for something, right?
This deep dive, it's been a roller coaster for sure. Evidence, theories, the human side of this tragedy.
And while we may never have all the answers, the search for truth, for understanding, it goes on.
We got to keep asking those tough questions, keep the conversation going.
For Karen, and for everyone affected by this kind of darkness.
That's all for this deep dive, folks. Thanks for joining us.